Hi there, it's Sarah from Crafty Creatures here with our puppy dog painting. So for today's painting, we're going to need our canvas panel. We want to place it portrait so it's taller than it is wide. We're going to need our paint colors. We don't need too many for this one. We're going to need our brushes. We're going to want a nice large one, any small one. Also going to need a pencil and eraser, something to wash our brushes in, and probably a little bit of paper towel just in case. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This one isn't too tricky. And we're going to start with some drawing steps. So the first thing we want to do is we're going to lightly draw a nice round circle for the head. And we're going to cut off a little bit at the bottom. Now I'm going to draw a little bit darker so you guys can see it easier on the camera. But I want to challenge you guys to draw as light as possible. It just makes it easier to erase. So once we have our head, we're going to go ahead and draw one half circle. That's one of our paws. And we're going to draw a bigger half circle this time. And we're going to add 4 circles on this, nice close together. Just a little bigger than a blueberry. And on each of those paws, we're going to draw another little circle. Those are going to be those cute little toe beans, as we call them. We can go ahead and erase those inside lines. This is why we draw light, because my lines aren't going to erase quite as smooth as yours. Next, we're going to go in between the paws. We're going to draw our nose. We're going to start with a nice, kind of flat, with a little bit of a curved line. And we're going to make a nice, simple triangle with that big flat side pointed up. Next, we're going to go a little bit above that. We're going to draw a nice round shape with a flat bottom. We're going to try to make them equal sizes, about the same distance apart. For our eyes, we'll add a nice little circle inside. And I'm just going to scribble on this just so I remember that that's the black part of my eyes. I'm going to paint that in at the very end. And now I'm going to draw the ears. Now you can draw the ears pointed up if you have like a shepherd dog, but I'm going to draw them like our nice floppy ears we have on our original painting here. So they're nice and swoopy. They start at the top of the head, a little to the side, and they swoop around. If they come off the canvas, that's okay. And then we're going to go ahead and draw our tail. Maybe kind of sticking out the top of our head. And don't worry, we're going to make it fluffy later on. So we can set our pencils and erasers aside. That's all we have to do for this drawing. It's nice and easy. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start with our background. But in order to do our background, we are going to have to mix some colors. So using my smaller brush, I'm going to go ahead and take out a nice big scoop of white paint. I'm going to make maybe about 2 scoops. I'm going to plop that onto our palette paper, make sure that shiny side is up. And we're going to start with a little scoop of red. Now red is a very, very powerful mixing color, so we always want to start with a little bit. We can always add more later on. And we're just going to stir it together. You can see that as I'm stirring, I'm trying to scoop everything back to the middle. I don't want to paint the palette paper. I want to keep everything as contained as I can until it's all one. Now I'm going to use this little paintbrush for a bit just because I already got paint on it. And I'm going to start by painting in the background very carefully, very careful of my edges. Down at the bottom here, I'm just going to go just a little bit up the side of the ear there. I don't need to go very far. Paint those in. And while I still have this color, I'm going to paint in the little toe beans. That's kind of our puppy's fingerprints. I'm just going to do that on the one paw that we drew those on. Kind of like this puppy's giving us a high five. I'm going to do my best to stay inside the lines. Of course, if we go outside the lines a little bit with this light color, it's not too big a deal. We will be able to paint over it with our darker color later. And make sure my paint's nice and smooth. And that's this first step done. Next, we're going to add in a bit more red. Actually, I'm going to add in 2 scoops of it this time. And we want a color that is a little bit closer to red than pink, kind of in the middle here. If this is really light, we want something that's a medium. We can test it by putting a little bit next to our first color and looking at it, and if we decide, yep, you know what, there's enough of a difference, we're going to go ahead and paint that in. Now I'm going to paint up to about here on my ears. I'm going to do the other side. And with every step, I want to make sure my paint goes on as smooth as possible. Globby paint does not dry well. And one last time, we're going to add a couple scoops of red. Make it even closer. And that's a bit closer to what I want. Now this time, I'm going to paint about half my remaining background, all the way up to about there. Now because this is a bigger space, I am going to switch to my bigger brush. But first, I'm going to use this small brush, since it's already got paint on it. And I'm going to trace around my lines, that way I don't go over the edges. Always go nice and slow around the edges of your pencil lines. This is a lot easier to control. And then we can go ahead and switch to our big brush. Now with our big brush, it's especially important that we're really taking our time to push that paint around. Big brush likes to suck up all the paint. We really want to make sure we're smoothing all that paint out. And now that that's filled in, we're going to wash our brushes. And we're going to switch to the red. Now, I'm actually going to turn my canvas around. This way it's easier for me to reach the top. When we're drawing, we want to keep our painting in one position. But once we get to the painting step, we can move those around any which way to make it easier to reach. I'm going to let those 2 colors kind of mix at the edge there. Now you can use the little brush to go around your edges. I'm feeling very confident. I'm just going to go ahead and use the big brush. Now we're going to wash our brushes and make sure they are super clean. You don't want any red paint left in there. Should be able to go like this on your hand and not see any red or pink coming out. Now we're going to start working on our puppy dog. And we're going to start again by grabbing a couple scoops of white. I'm going to put it somewhere in our palette paper that we have some room. And we're going to make it maybe 2 or 3 big scoops. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab 1 big scoop of brown to start. We're going to mix. And now we're going to go ahead and start painting in just the face. So I'm going to trace around my paws and my edge of my face. And we want to be very careful on the edge of our eyes. If we mess up, we can always add in a little bit of white to go over it, but it's a bit easier just to leave something white than it is to try to paint it in. Now for our next step, we're just going to use plain brown. Don't even need to mix. We're going to start filling in our paws and our ears. We're going to go nice and slow on our edges. That's going to make them nice and sharp. Now that all those steps are done, we're going to turn it around again. So we're going to work on our tail now. I'm going to do a little special trick. So first thing we're going to do is we're just going to quickly fill in our tail like normal. We don't have to worry too much about the edges of the tail, just where it meets the head. And what we're going to do is we're going to make sure we got some paint on our brush, especially near the edge. And we're going to start going off our tail like this. Once we start to run low on paint, we're going to dip it again. We're just going to go off the edge of our tail, nice and fuzzy. See how I've got all these nice short fuzzy lines? I'm going to wash my brush again, make sure it's nice and clean for this very last step. Now this step we have to be very careful with. We're going to use black. And I'm not putting very much on my brush. This way I have lots of control. I'm going to go nice and slow, starting with my eyes. Unfortunately, if we make a mistake with the black, we're just going to have to try to make it look like we did it on purpose. And then it's all done. That's our finished puppy dog painting. Now, if I want to fix that little bit of drippage there, I'm going to dab a little bit of white with the wrong end of a paintbrush. And just kind of smooth it out. Maybe even dab it with my finger. And that'll touch it up there. And that's our painting all finished. Thank you for painting with me today. You have a good day. Bye-bye.